Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Stamp Speakeasy. I am your host, Srethne, and every episode we bring a comic from all over the country to interview about their comedy journey so far. And I was hoping to go on tour, but the pandemic hit and I couldn't do it. So it's much better to do it from home with this interview series, the Stamp Speakeasy. So without further ado, coming all the way from Alabama is Matthew Tate. Hey, Matthew, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks for joining me today. So uh, awesome. So let's see here. So you were born in St. Louis and you were raised in Alabama. And what was your early years in St. Louis like?
Uh, Pretty standard childhood, I guess. Was raised by my dad after he and my mom split when I was 3. And yeah, had a stepmom and she basically, was very instrumental in raising me too. And lived there until I was 11, and then moved down here. My dad had a job as a military contractor, and so there were a bunch of families that moved from that area to this area, about 1,100 families around 97, 98, and was here for a few years, bounced around a little bit, went to Philly, came back, went to Illinois, came back again when I was 22, and then been here since.
Awesome. It seems like a lot of traveling you've done. I've been to Chicago, but that's the only city I've been to in Illinois, and it's a fantastic city that I got to visit. So did stand up twice there, so it was 2 shows. So it was fantastic.
Oh, nice. I've not been back to do stand up, but not in Chicago anyway. A couple other small areas in Illinois, but I lived in a really rural area when I was up there. But I did some work in Chicago while I was there because I used to work in politics, doing like campaign managing, speech writing, and networking and stuff like that.
That sounds like a lot of fun for sure. I haven't kept too much up with politics and stuff because it's like I know who the president is and all that stuff, but it's just been a whirlwind as of late. So
Yeah, it
so
can be a little bit oversaturating now for certain.
most definitely, indeed. And so you're part of the Huntsville, Alabama scene. And what's it like performing stand up in Huntsville, Alabama?
It's great. I really like the scene. That's part of why I've never left. I'm like one of the original scene builders here. When I started, we had like a couple fledgling mics and a couple fledgling shows, and we've expanded to the point that now we have something pretty much every night of the week, if not multiple things on many of those nights. And it's a really conveniently located city for touring acts, especially because, I mean, from here, you're only like 4 hours from Memphis, only an hour and a half from Birmingham, an hour and a half from Chattanooga, 2 hours from Nashville, like 3.5 hours from Atlanta. So, we get a lot of names just off of convenience and also off of reputation for some of our shows. Because we have a bunch of shows that have been running for 7, 8, 9, 10 years.
Wow, that's incredible. Like when I plan on going to, taking like I'm planning on living like in a month in each city in the times and different in the central time zone in different cities, like spend a month in each one, and hopefully I can spend it in Huntsville because like you said, it's centrally located and you don't have to drive as far to go to like all those different markets, and it sounds fantastic.
Yeah, and I mean it's both a boon for us here in the scene as showrunners and people who are looking to open and feature and host for people. It's also really a boon for a lot of those touring acts, because like somebody could be doing a weekend in Nashville, and then I have a Monday night show. That's the one that I've been running for 8 years, and so normally a lot of the times out on the road, Mondays are kind of a dead night, for touring comics, but they can always swing through and do my thing and set up for the latter portion of the week or the next weekend in another nearby city.
Indeed, most definitely. We have some viewers in the audience, so if you'd like to chime in on the comments section, the chat box, you're more than welcome to interact with us, but be nice to us and we'll answer all your questions. And so, speaking of your show that you've been producing for 8 years now, it's called TGIM Comedy, and also speak up to the homegrown comedy shows that you produce too. How did that all start, and what were those early years like, and what is it like now?
Well, TGIM is a bar show. It started out as just an open mic, and the bar's actually changed management since then. It used to be a place called Olivia's Sports Bar and Grill. Now it's called Maggie Myers Irish Pub. Um, but yeah, I started that out in 2013. The venue closed that same year, but then reopened the following year, and we picked it right back up from where it was. The owner approached me, another venue that she owned at the time, and told me she had heard about how well Monday Night Comedy went over there. And so we started the mic back up. And then a few months in, Carlos Valencia, I don't know if you've met or worked with him.
Not yet.
Okay, he's a delight. I really like him. He's a guy who used to work a lot with Doug Stanhope and Christine Levine and the sorts. Yeah, he hit up some of the other showrunners in the scene, was looking for something to do in town on a Monday night, and that was when I negotiated with the venue to basically have a payout system for headlined acts, and they were so happy with how that went that we still do them to this day, years later, and the show's kind of garnered a reputation as like one of the better Monday shows to do in the Southeast. I mean, it would not quite like the reputation of Star Bar, but give us another 12 years maybe.
Indeed, most definitely. And I love performing in Irish pubs. Like my homeroom it's called the Tirnog Irish Pub in Daytona Beach. It's like the land of the youth. And my buddies go, if you rearrange the letters, it's ignorant. And I'm like, oh, no wonder we're like a bunch of rascals here that perform. So it's fantastic. So you have some albums out that I got to check out, and the first one is called "I Drink Therefore I Am." And how did you come up with the title, and what was that recording process like?
I don't even rightly recall how I came up with that specific title. I do know that I had a bunch of possible titles. One of them was Schadenfreudian, which I think is a witty title, but not very Googleable. But basically, I just created a Facebook poll and asked my friends and followers to vote on what the name of the album would be out of the options I provided, and that was the one they picked. But yeah, the recording process was it was terrifying, frankly. I did record that at TGIM at Maggie Myers, and so at least it was like a home spot. But I'd never done anything of the like before. At that point, I hadn't even helped anybody else record their albums. But at this point, I've done it. But at that point, when I recorded, it was 2015 that I recorded, or early 2016, I can't recall. But it was kind of venturing into the unknown sort of thing. And it wound up being like lightning in a bottle. I mean, I believe all comedy albums should be recorded in one take, and that's exactly how that went. And it went well, and it met with a mild amount of success. So it was I sold out of my first 3 prints of the album. So yeah, I'm happy that I got my feet wet doing that, because I've been basically doing the same thing ever since. Made another couple of recordings.
That's fantastic. I agree wholeheartedly with that one shot, or capturing that lightning in a bottle and doing it in one take. And I did the same for my record called Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll, where I'm saying all these really dirty things for 25 minutes or like a half an hour. I put in a bonus track in there and not saying a single curse word. So but it's not on Spotify. It's a physical album. So I'm like old school. I burned every single one of them, printed all the labels and all that stuff. And so you also came up with Game Set Trashed, and it debuted on Amazon, the #1 spot for the Amazon bestsellers list in 2020. And what was that like, topping the charts?
It was really neat, frankly, and it's a little bit of a misnomer. Actually, my second album actually accidentally got miscategorized. on Amazon. So it falls for some reason under the easy listening category on Amazon. But I mean, it debuted at #1 and it stayed there for about a month. I'm not certain it would have done the same exact thing if it had gotten properly genred, but
Indeed,
it's a good note anyway, I guess.
Indeed,
Hey, I was above Dean Martin, so
Indeed. I always find that silver lining in life. It's fantastic. And so you also released an EP length single called The Happiness Illusion. And what was that like? The whole atmosphere, the recording process, etc.
That one was very different. I used a different sound engineer and a different host on that one. Tom Hand, who's the one of the managers for my home club, Stand Up Live. He was the one who did the hosting duties for my first 2 albums. And then my friend Travis did all the sound engineering and audio capture. And on The Happiness Illusion, because a lot of people weren't going out as much, I had to find different staff. And fortunately, during the time just before the pandemic, I got to meet Compton Smith. And so he was the one who wound up volunteering basically to do the hosting duties, the sound capture, all the audio editing. I'm really happy with it, and it was a set that I really needed to, or recording I really needed to record and release last year because it kind of had a shelf life on it. It was all about dealing with all the things that were screwed up about 2020 and how they impact us as people. As individuals, and so I wanted to get it out while it was still pertinent.
Indeed, most definitely. And Compton's a great fella. I got to interview him earlier a while back, and he has a really great voice for like radio and podcast and everything. I was like, and he's with you, like you said, with the audio stuff, he's really good with the audio stuff too. So excellent stuff. So you've also performed at the Wild West Comedy Festival, and what are your favorite memories from that festival?
So the part of that I performed on was the Broken Record show. Have you heard about that? Yeah. So it was an 8.5-day long comedy show where we broke the Guinness World Record for longest stand-up comedy show featuring multiple performers. And I did that a couple separate years because they ran it 4 years in a row, and just every year they broke their own record. Yeah, there's a lot of memories from that. A lot of sleep deprivation, definitely, because one of the stipulations of that show was at all times there had to be 10 awake audience members, or else the record was like cut and nullified. And so basically, if you're stuck in there watching the show at like the dead hours, like 3, 4, 5 a.m., and there's just 10 people in there, you're kind of held hostage until somebody can kind of come and relieve you. Like you can't even get up and go use the bathroom or anything like that. Like you're just glued to your chair. But it was a lot of opportunities for stage time because they'd make a comprehensive schedule of the whole 8.5 days and who goes on at what specific time, how long their sets are. And because of the nature of the show, of course, there were a lot of people who dropped out. There were also a lot of people who dropped in. And so, kind of like the more time you spent in the venue, the more likely you'd be able to squeeze in more sets. I remember at one point I had to do a 2.5-hour set, and it was torture. And the really funny thing about it is by like day 3, everybody's so sleep deprived and like they haven't been eating properly and they've just been watching comedy the whole time, and they get so burned out on stand-up. Like nobody wants to see any stand-up comedy anymore by that point. And that's when the sets started to get really weird, and people would start doing like audience participation stuff and like TED Talks. And one comic, Hunter Roberts, did an hour-long set where he'd ask the audiences for any number between 1 and 37, and based on that number, he'd tell you everything there was to know about that numbered WrestleMania. He's got like a Rain Man encyclopedic knowledge of pro wrestling. And like, it was those really strange moments like that made that whole show and that whole experience really, really special. But man, I came back with like a flu or something like both years I went, just because of how hard I was pushing myself. And I think the same happened to a lot of other people. I miss it, but I don't, you know?
Indeed. It reminds me of my buddy Marcus in Jacksonville. He's like an encyclopedia of wrestling knowledge, and it's just fun to pick their brains and stuff. And I remember, like, when you mentioned the like over 2.5 hour show, I remember seeing Joe Coy in Jacksonville too, and like 2 hours of his set was just crowd work too, and I'm like, that's just wild. I'm like, I wish I had, I can do crowd work for 2 hours before jumping into my jokes, but it was pretty awesome. And you were also featured in Noella magazine, as well. I think that's how you pronounced it.
Yeah,
It's like
Noella.
awesome. And what was that like, being featured in that magazine?
It was neat. That was actually early on in stand up for me. I'd only been doing it for like a couple of years at that point. And they did like a really extensive photo shoot for us with Roger Patterson, one of the big professional photographers here in Huntsville. And they had the person writing the column for us interview me and 5 other comedians at that time. And it wound up being, I think, like a 17-page spread. And the headshot that I have used for a lot of shows over the years still like is the headshot from that magazine shoot. And which I need to get a new headshot, because that one is of me looking a little bit different. Like, I didn't have glasses, I didn't have hair, I had a full goatee. And so yeah, sometimes it's kind of funny when showrunners still use that headshot for me, and then like people see me on the stage and they're like, what?
Indeed. And cute pup, what's your pup's name?
This is my friend's puppy. This is Noodles.
Awesome, good stuff. I love noodles myself, so it's fantastic. Indeed. And you're also in al.com, and they did a piece on you as well. And what was that like, working with al.com?
They've done a couple pieces on me. The first one was written by Matt Wake, who's mostly known for doing entertainment writing, especially as it involves music. That was for a show that I did I ran for a veterans benefit charity called Operation Stand Down back in 2013. And it was a big old show that we ran out of the American Legion. I believe that night we had 33 comics in the lineup. So definitely a long show. Everybody did 5-minute sets with the exception of a couple of the comics. But yeah, it was a great experience. We raised a lot of money for the charity that night. And trying to remember what even the second publication they had me in was about. It's been a little while.
Indeed, most definitely. And you were also in the Montgomery Advertiser as well. And what was that experience like?
That was wonderful. The story actually got the center page. It mostly revolved around the Montgomery comedy scene as it stood at that time. And they did a photo shoot for that as well. And within the article, they just plugged a show that I was headlining at the time, and basically gave some info in my bio at the time. And Trey, who conducted the interview, kind of talked a little bit about my comedy stylings and the stylings of the feature I brought with me. But it was really neat to do that as well, and that's definitely a thing I still have hanging on my wall all these years later. That was, I think, 2014, 2015, somewhere around there.
Indeed, most definitely. And you were also part of the YouTube stand-up series called Punching Up Below the Bible Belt, and I like that name. It's hilarious. And what was that whole experience like?
Wonderful. It wasn't quite how we anticipated it was going to be initially. So my friend Jesse Pollard got the green light from Prime actually to do that series, but they wound up canceling it, and so it wound up just being a YouTube series. But it was a lot of fun. Got to work with a lot of different comics from all over, and they're still currently releasing episodes. They're releasing like 1 or 2 a week. Mine came out just about a month and a half ago, I think. But it was a very fun experience.
Awesome, fantastic. And with this episode, we're raising funds for arts and autism. And why did you choose those fine folks to raise funds for?
My friend Richard Lockhart in Tuscaloosa, actually, he has a daughter who's on the scale, who has benefited from this program. It's a wonderful like outreach and summer camp and after school activity center for people who are on the autism scale. And basically, I did one show fundraising for them with Richard back in the day, and because I saw how important that charity was to him, in turn, it just became my go-to charity for any fundraiser, a lot of the fundraisers I've done over the years. And so it just seemed a natural choice. You know, I love the guys down in Tuscaloosa comedy, and definitely want to support the things they're passionate about as well.
Indeed, most definitely. And I made sure to put all their information below in the description box below. So feel free to go visit their website and see what they do and see if you can help out. That'd be fantastic. And Matthew, I forgot to ask you, like on your records, there's all the streaming platforms out there, and where can the listeners or the viewers listen to your albums?
Basically everywhere except for Pandora. So, I mean, Spotify, Amazon Music, iTunes, Apple Music, Google Play Music, Napster is still a thing. It's a streaming service now. The funny thing about it is it actually pays its artists more than any other streaming service, which is, you know, kind of the exact opposite of the hot water Napster got into, you know, when I was young.
Wow.
But yeah, it's available on all those platforms for download or for streaming. I also made physical copies, but you know, people don't really buy CDs as much these days.
Indeed, most definitely. And would you happen to have like one of those link trees that everyone's using, and I can probably put that in the post production?
Yeah, yeah.
Awesome, fantastic. And I'll have you message me on Messenger, and then I'll put that on there for you. And Matthew, I was hoping to go on tour and interview comics in person, but the pandemic hit, and these are the questions that you ask every comic. So with that being said, what inspired you to perform stand-up comedy?
A number of things, really. I was always a big fan of stand-up comedy growing up. You know, when I was a child, like Sinbad was like the most popular comic on the face of the earth, one of the most popular personalities out there, period. So I think he was kind of my introduction to being a fan of stand-up comedy, him and Paula Poundstone, actually. And just kind of over the years, I developed more and more of a fondness for it. In my early to late teens, like I was constantly watching Comic View on BET and Comedy Central Presents. And anyway, then at one point in time when I was living in Illinois, sorry if this is dark subject matter for this interview, but I went through a rough patch where I was a drug addict, and I remember just having a moment of clarity one time when I was coming down, and my friend it showed me a Doug Stanhope stand-up special, and I just kind of had this moment click in me, like, what the hell am I doing? I could be doing so many other things with my life than what I'm doing right now. And fast forward from there, about 3 years, I'd moved down here, cleaned up, and I'm just in a bar that I happened to frequent at the time. Strangely, it's right around the corner from where I'm doing this interview at my friend's house. And Tom Hands, the guy I mentioned earlier, who's works over at Stand Up Live, he started a comedy open mic there, and I'd always kind of had an idea like I'd like to be a stand-up comedian, but I never knew like how one goes about it. I didn't know like comedy open mics were a thing. I guess I was a little bit naive at the time, and anyway, as I just watched him and the other comics for the first couple weeks, and then like after the second or third week I watched them, I asked him if I could do a spot next week, and of course he responded with, "Of course you can. It's an open mic. Anybody can." So I spent about a week writing a set. Got up for my first time in August of 2012, and just have never looked back since. And since then, I've started shows like TGIM Homegrown, which we didn't quite touch on yet. And now I'm starting a new show at Shenanigans Comedy Theater here in town, and also running a Sunday open mic out in Madison, which is a suburb of where I live. And it's been a fun journey.
Indeed. We'll touch base on Homegrown and how did that all come about?
So Homegrown actually predated, as a show concept, it actually predated me doing comedy by about 2 months, I think. It was put together by Tom Hand and Brandon Imes, who's just moved down to Tampa from here, and Thaddeus Blake. And Thaddeus is still a co-producer on the show. And anyway, I performed on that show a few times in my early years, and then started just volunteering and helping with the show, like running doors or setting up chairs or whatever they needed for a few years. And then they approached me, and the producers approached me in late 2018 and asked me to come on as a co-producer. And I was ecstatic to do that for, a show that already was so historied. And so I've been co-producing that for the last couple of years, and with Brandon moving now and Thaddeus stepping back slightly, it's kind of weird because now I'm kind of like one of the head showrunners on that, and brought on a new co-producer who goes by the internet handle Tamagram. She and I were actually supposed to go on tour ourselves last year, which is something I talk about in my latest single. But yeah, we're rebuilding the show out of the pandemic and out of the structure changes. But it's still going strong, and it'll be celebrating 9 years this year, and I'll have been part of it for 3 years by that point. And it's a really phenomenal show, though. A lot of comics from the region like popping in and doing.
Indeed, most definitely. Awesome story behind Homegrown for sure. And what was it feeling like when you first performed stand-up?
Kind of like when I used to do heroin. It was like the first time was the best feeling in the world, and I've just been chasing it ever since.
Indeed, I hear that a lot with a lot of comics. They chase the dragon is what they say, and I'm like, I'm straight edge, so I wouldn't know those things. But I saw like Requiem for a Dream, and I'm like, all right, that's enough for me. I learned my.
I can't even watch that movie. It's so unsettling.
Indeed, most definitely. It's definitely reality check. Don't get the regular version. Get the director's cut, and then you'll see. It's much more bonkers. But the score is amazing, though. I gotta say that Clint Mansell is brilliant. And so what you mentioned, Doug Stanhope, and I've listened to his specials and seen his record, or heard his record. And what are your favorite comedy specials and comedy record albums?
I think my favorite Stanhope special definitely is Beer Hall Putsch, that he did back in 2013. I actually got to meet him recently, and that was really cool, meeting your heroes and whatnot. I don't have a whole lot of other like specific favorite specials. I would say one of mine would probably, it's technically a one-man Broadway act, but I really like John Leguizamo's Latin History for Morons. That's a really, really good one that's on Netflix. Drew Michaels' self-titled special is that he did for HBO. That's another one that I really like. And as far as other like just comics that I really love, like my Mount Rushmore or what have you. I gotta say, like, Richard Pryor is like my number one. Doug Stanhope, Gilbert Gottfried, and probably Kristen Shaw. Kristen Shaw doesn't get as much respect as she deserves as kind of a pioneer of alt comedy, and she's so hilarious and so amazing.
Absolutely, indeed. I love John Leguizamo too. Like he's the reason why I got into stand up, and like
Really?
yeah, big time. Like I remember watching like Manny the Fanny. Do you remember like that?
Yeah.
And like that whole thing where he's like, he sings that girlfriend song and every once in a while, and it's just like the whole thing that he put together was just amazing. And watching a lot of his one man shows and watching some documentaries on Amazon Prime behind one of the recent ones there where he got to go to Chicago and do it and all that stuff was just he's like the main reason why I'm doing stand up. So, and I loved his
Very
sketch
good.
show, A House of Buggin' when it was on Fox. And so, speaking of sketch shows, what are your favorite sketch shows, sitcoms, and comedy films?
My favorite all-time sketch show is one that usually when I tell people about it, they have no idea what I'm talking about. But have you heard of The State?
I have, yep, on MTV
Yeah.
back in the day. Yep.
Yeah, everybody always scratches their head when I bring that one up, but that's probably my all-time favorite sketch show, followed by In Living Color. I mean, both of those shows went on to, bring so much talent out there, and I mean, like the Reno 911 would have never happened if it wasn't for The State. Everything that Michael Ian Black and Michael Showalter did wouldn't have happened if they hadn't laid that foundation with The State. And of course, I love SNL too. I mean, like any period of time, even they're not as funny periods. Like SNL has been around for as long as it's been around for a reason. Like it's a top-notch sketch show.
Most definitely, indeed. Like my favorite part of like my favorite sketches in Living Color were like the dozens where they talk about each other's moms, the game show.
Yeah,
Yes, and Wanda is my favorite, and Men on Film, and I and SNL. My favorite parts were like the Bad Boys of SNL with like Chris Farley and David Spade and Adam Sandler and such. And I remember they had the Gap Girls sketch, and Tom, like Chris Farley. I almost said Tommy Boy, but that's my favorite comedy film. He was like eating French fries, and they're like, "I thought you were on a diet," and Chris Farley's like, "Lay off me, I'm starving," and I do that to all my friends. It's like, it's fantastic. So, and also, we talked about favorite sitcoms and comedy films.
let's see. Yeah, I'm not a big sitcom guy. I never really have been. Yeah, I really can't name any sitcoms that I really enjoy. Honestly, I do like some comedic series or like dramedies, like Boston Legal is probably one of my all-time favorite shows in that vein. I thought that William Shatner and James Spader had a really hilarious duality in that show. Uh, Never did care for William Shatner until I saw him in that series. Comedy films. I gotta say my number one all-time favorite comedy film is a romantic comedy, and I'm not usually a really big rom-com person, but I would definitely have to say my number one all-time favorite comedy film would have to be Singles, which is really funny rom-com set in grunge era Seattle. And I've always like really loved the Seattle scene music and whatnot. Like Pearl Jam's one of my favorite bands. They make a really funny cameo in that movie. Matt Dillon's in it. He plays like a prototypical, like stereotypical grunge rocker of the era. Slapshot, also one of my favorite comedy films. I actually got to photobomb the guys who played the Hanson brothers in Slapshot one time, and that was a fun experience. Slapshot's one of those movies that's endlessly quotable, kind of like The Princess Bride. You know, like if you know it, you know every line.
Indeed, most definitely. I need to watch singles because I love rom-coms and I love the Seattle grunge scene. And like when I was a concert journalist in Los Angeles, I got to cover a lot of the bands from the Seattle area during the grunge
Oh, that's neat.
era. Yeah, it was pretty dope. Like I got to see Soundgarden perform at the Wiltern. They were doing 3 sold-out shows, and I was there for the first one. And I still have my shirt and my poster from there. And I got to see Alice in Chains Unplugged, and I got to cover that show. And like Heart was on the bill with like Billy Idol, and Steve-O was the host. It was just like the most insane concert ever. And
That
they
sounds
were just
amazing.
it was pretty neat. They were celebrating Jerry Cantrell's sobriety, so it was fantastic. And I got to cover Pearl Jam in Jacksonville, and they did like there was no direct report, no opening act. It was them for all those hours, and I whenever I get to go to concerts for free, so I buy their merch, and I bought a Pearl Jam shirt, and I was in the photo pit, and I was like the only one in the photo pit with a Pearl Jam shirt, and Eddie Vedder looks down on me from the stage and gives me this big old smile. I'm like, "You rock, Eddie, you rock, dude." So it was pretty gnarly. Um, those are my favorite concert memories from all those grunge acts from Seattle. And if you can go on tour with, and they've been on tour a bunch of times with all those acts, and if you can go on tour with any comedian locally and internationally known, which comedians would you like to go on tour with?
Oh man, definitely Stanhope would be the absolute top of my list because you know, not just how hilarious he is, but he's also a very down to earth, nice person to the folks that he works with. And I feel like if you're going to go on tour with somebody, uh, being able to stand them is definitely one of the most paramount things. I think, yeah, I think he'd be my number one. Kristen Shaw would definitely be up there a lot. I would absolutely love to open for her one day. Um, Most of the rest would be, you know, indie names, you know, people, you know, like at our level. I just love the experience of, you know, touring, doing the road dog thing and, you know, crashing on people's couches, you know, riding 6 hours to do the next show down the road with, you know, one of your best friends from your own local scene. It's, you know, it's an experience not a large percentage of the population, you know, really gets to experience. And I think it's really special.
Indeed. I remembered my first long trip from like hours wise was like I was on tour and I had to go from like the northern part of Georgia all the way down to Tallahassee. And it was just like because my shows were back to back, and I was like I had to leave early and miss traffic and all that stuff. And boy, that was a long trip by myself. But it was in a rental car, so it wasn't my car. So I'm glad the wear and tear was on the rental. So, um, let's see here. If you can get roasted by 5 comedians, past and present, which comedians would you like to get roasted by?
Get roasted by? Oh, my number one on that list, without a doubt, would be Gilbert Gottfried. I guess some of the others that I'd like to be roasted by would probably be some of those comics that are you know, staples of the Comedy Central roasts. Like it'd be really fun to be roasted by Patton Oswalt. Uh, Probably Anthony Jeselnik for sure. Lisa Lampanelli, and you know what? I'm just gonna pick one non-comedian to roast me because I think it would be a delight and a dream come true, and that would be Serena Williams.
That's an awesome mix there. And I love that you mentioned Gilbert Gottfried. And I got to watch this documentary the other day and on DVD, and it was fantastic. It was just, I have it in my collection, and it's just great to learn about everything from, when he got fired from Aflac to like, and his wife and, and his kids and living in New York and being like the old school comic. And it's just a great documentary. So it's fantastic.
You
Highly
know, I
recommend.
actually had no idea that even exists. What's it called?
I just believe it's called just Godfried, or I can't remember. But as soon as I do find out, or maybe it's Gilbert, it's just his name. But as soon as I find out, I'll definitely give you the name of it and where you can find it. But I recommend the documentary. So
Heck yeah, I appreciate it, man. I definitely want to watch that. I'm a huge Gilbert fan, you know.
awesome! I love the way he talks too, and the way how dirty he gets on stage. Just warms my heart for sure. Indeed. And where do you see your comedy journey in the next 5 years?
Um, like what I hope to be doing.
Yep.
Uh, hopefully pick up where, hopefully picking up where last year was supposed to pick up. Which is phasing out the day job, going on tour. I had 47 tour dates with Tamagram that we unfortunately had to scrap, and it was going to be the year that I as we say, quit the day job. Hopefully keep meeting with some success on my future album releases. I got a really good response off of Game Set Trashed, and my Spotify listenership I mean multiplied more than 10 times over. And I hope to keep building off of that foundation of success I've already built. And hope to really just frankly be able to do a little bit on the road, but I mostly want to stay focused right here in Huntsville, as a showrunner and kind of mentor to younger comedians, and keep doing that. I'm finally, after all of these years, which I'm only a little bit less than 9 years into it, but it's a significant chunk of time for someone my age. Finally paying the majority of my bills off of comedy, and I hope to just be able to continue to do that, but to a greater degree. Maybe save up a nest egg, have a little bit of financial stability. So I guess basically just make a living doing what I love. That's what I want.
Indeed, that's an excellent 5 year plan, and I hope that you do that over 40 date tour. That'd be pretty neat, and hopefully it includes Florida and stuff. It'd be pretty awesome. If you need help setting that up, friends from everyone from the Panhandle all the way to Miami, because I did all these interviews with all those comics. So you let me know, and I'll help you set up that part of the U.S.
I really appreciate it. Thank you. And I do know that I'm going to be down there for certain in late August, early September, and kind of going to be doing a working vacation. I need my beach time, but also I figured while I'm down there, why not set up some shows? So I do know I'm doing a show that Andrew Ferrara set me up with in Pensacola in early September, and probably gonna look at trying to get one or two other dates lined up while I'm in the area. So I'll definitely holler at you, a couple months before I head down that way.
Fantastic, indeed. I'll keep an eye out for your messages for sure.
I
And
appreciate it.
indeed. And Matthew, which other forms of comedy would you venture off into, like improv, sketch, comedy writing, acting, directing, etc.?
So I've done improv, and occasionally I still do it. It's not really my thing. I've done sketch comedy, and stand-up's my go-to. I've also done, comedy writing, done some satire writing. We used to have a Huntsville-based satire website, kind of in the style of The Onion, called The Rocket Wrangler, and we actually had a few articles from that go viral. That's always a lot of fun. I like it all, but stand-up's my passion.
Indeed, most definitely. And let's see here. What is your favorite joke a comic has written?
What is my favorite what now?
A joke a comic has written.
Oh, that would be, God, that would definitely be, if anybody ever asks or says the words stand-up comedy to me, like what's the first bit you think of when you hear the word stand-up comedy? it is always for me that classic John Mulaney salt and pepper diner bit. Like no matter how many times I hear that joke, it never gets old, and it appeals to my own trollish nature and uh, how I like to mess with people with the jukebox. And so it's a funny and relatable story, and I mean Mulaney just tells it so masterfully.
Absolutely, I agree. I love his comedy too. And let's see, what experience would you like your audience to take with them after a set is over?
Uh, After one of my sets is over, usually I like the audience to take away a sense of not feeling alone. A lot of my comedy deals with some of the darker facets of humanity. Dealing with depression, dealing with people who are no longer there. Thoughts of suicide, stuff like that. I try to take those things that are so often looked down upon or judged, or people feel like we need to be hush hush about or pretend it doesn't exist or fake it till you make it with your happiness. And people, I feel like, are very tight-lipped about their feelings and their mental health, and I think that what I want audiences who see me to take away from a set of mine is knowing that they're not alone, and knowing that it's okay to not be okay, and it's okay to write something funny out of it, do something creative out of it, and to tell people about it. It's okay to use all of that as a catharsis too, and finding some joy in all of the confusion.
And most definitely, and I agree. It's like, I go through depression too, and my buddy back home in Colorado is like, if you're gonna be a stand-up comic, you either got to be either egotistical or depressed. And I'm like, all right, I guess I'm in the middle somewhere, because I tend to like go balance back and forth, and so try to keep that needle in the middle. So for
Well, I
sure.
think most of us are a touch of both.
Absolutely, indeed. And Matthew, this is the part where you nominate your favorite comics out of Alabama, if you will, surrounding areas where you are at in Huntsville. And so this is the Stand-Up Speakeasy. The Roaring Twenties is a prohibition. It's a secret society of stand-up comics, and so you gotta know someone to join the club. So with that being said, Matthew, which comics would you like to see on a future episode of the Stand-Up Speakeasy?
I would like to nominate Scott Eason, J.C. Ratliff, and Dual F. Aldridge.
Awesome. I'll be sure to reach out all those comics and see if they'd like to be on the show, and hopefully they check out their filtered messages, or if I can find an email of theirs or something, and I'll reach out to them and have them on as my future guest. And please visit all the fine websites that Matthew's on, and from Facebook to Instagram to Twitter. Donate to his PayPal. Donate. Check out Arts and Autism. Donate to them if you can, and all the links and everything are on the bottom of the description box below, as well as scrolling. So, with that being said, Matthew, are there any final words you'd like to give out to the audience at home?
Y'all stay safe. Y'all stay fabulous. We're gonna get to the other side of this thing, hopefully sooner than later, and I hope to see you guys at some shows.
Awesome, fantastic. And Matthew, thank you so much for being my guest on the Stand Up Speakeasy. And everyone be safe, be well, and take care of each other. And we'll see you on the next episode of the Stand Up Speakeasy.